Hi there, and welcome to a special edition, a special episode of Social PR Secrets, the podcast. My name is Lisa Beyer, and I'm going to be your guest. So today is going to be a solo session, and I thought it would be kind of fun to give you an example session of one of my past Pubcon sessions that was just this year in January. And the focus was on marketing, small businesses, and professional services. So in this session, I covered a bunch of different topics, local PR, Google, social, reviews, virtual events, augmented reality, virtual reality, and audio. I like to look at all of these things as different ways that we can integrate search and social and new technologies into the public relations strategy. So just real quick, if you're not familiar with Pubcon, I've been speaking at this digital marketing conference for more than 15 years, between 15 and 18 years, I would say. I first started attending it because I was a public relations professional wanting to learn as much as possible about digital back in the day when Google and Yahoo and Bing and Facebook and Twitter were all just coming onto the scene, and it wasn't as common to use all these different digital marketing opportunities in the public relations strategy. So I had a lot of my clients asking me for advice. So I decided to go out of my PR box and actually attend a conference that was completely out of my element. So Pubcon was one of my first conferences that I attended. And I just felt so empowered by learning everything. So I went to a few and I got to know all the speakers and the event producers, and they invited me to speak on the subject of integrating PR with search and social. And from then it was history. So let's start with local public relations, and what exactly does that mean when I say local public relations? So if you're a restaurant, any type of professional service company, a hair salon, where you're serving a certain geographic radius, then that you would be considered a local small business or have a local location. So when we talk about local public relations, what does that really mean? And PR is one of those terms that is thrown around a lot and has different meanings to different people. So I'm just going to go over how I'm referring to local PR, or some would call it press, or some would call it publicity. So what exactly is that? So it's earned media, meaning that we cannot go out and buy this type of exposure. It's something that is third-party credibility. It actually carries more credibility than advertising does. It's like a third-party endorsement. So when somebody writes a story and includes you as an expert source, it's not you, the brand, saying it. It's somebody else saying it. So it's like word of mouth, but it's word of mouth through the media, or even through social media, or through Google. It's considered social proof, and it also helps in your top-of-funnel marketing for brand awareness. So some examples of local editorial coverage, it could be different things. So it could be, you might get on your local TV station, nightly news, and maybe they're doing a story about, the latest update on Facebook and how it's impacting your business. And, maybe that's a story that you pitch to the media. Or maybe it's your local lifestyle publication or local business journal, or even the book of lists, or different types of lists like 40 under 40. So those are the different, not inclusive, there's a lot of different types of local editorial coverage, but those are some examples. So how can you leverage these types of publications? So you could get quoted as in the news as an expert source. So that could be in a digital online version of a publication. It could be on radio, it could be on a podcast like you're listening to right now, or it could be on a TV station. You could also have a guest column in a local publication. So you could pitch the editor and say, hey, I want to write a guest column once a month or twice a month on digital marketing, or on maybe small businesses and finance, or maybe you're a financial expert and you'll have a column that you'll write once a month from the financial expert. Or maybe you're a foodie and you can write a monthly column about the local food trends that are happening. So there's different creative angles that you can come up with where you could insert yourself into the news and start networking. You could also, like I said, be a guest on podcasts. You could also mix and mingle at your local chamber. And that can mean maybe you're writing for the local chamber newsletter, and that's exactly right in front of the audience that you need to be in front of. So you can, it doesn't have to be, as big as the nightly news. It could be as easy as your local chamber and starting there. So how do you do this? How do you do public relations? Do you need to hire an agency? The answer is no. You can do it yourself. You could hire freelancers. There's multiple ways that you could start with a public relations effort, and it doesn't have to be a big expense. It could be on any type of budget. So steps that you can do it yourself. First, you need to identify and really have an understanding of who is your audience. So for example, you want to make sure if you're going to be writing for the chamber newsletter that that's the chamber that your audience is actually going to be paying attention to. So you also want to look at maybe listing out what are your top 3 to 5 media outlets, and what are those media outlets that is resonating with your audience. So maybe, like I said, maybe it's you have a local lifestyle magazine that is exactly the publication that your audience is paying attention to. So you want to brainstorm different angles and different story ideas that would maybe be trending or maybe be tying in with the holiday like Black Friday. You want to make sure you know who is the reporter, the editors, or the producers who would be in charge of this type of angle. And then what I like to do is follow them on social. So look them up on Instagram or Twitter and see if you can start forming an online relationship with them and paying attention to what types of stories that they're sharing. I like to also recommend that you create a very short and personalized pitch. So this is a big mistake that a lot of brands and also a lot of publicists make this mistake, a lot of publicists that are just starting out and even some seasoned publicists. It's something that you really have to try to get it right. And so creating this very short and personalized pitch is really an art and takes a lot of practice. And I kind of like to compare it to when Twitter first came out and, we were writing tweets, we're still writing tweets, and, you have a certain character limit, and there's a lot you can say in less than 200 characters. And so I like to just compare a pitch to be like, imagine you are limited to 200 characters, and how can you get out your pitch in 200 characters or less? And that could take a while. You could take 2 to 3 hours just to formulate that pitch or formulate that perfect tweet. In that, you want to really stand out. So if you're basically just saying what everybody else is saying about a certain topic, you're not going to stand out. So making sure that you are really a little bit colorful and bold about your point of view and about your expertise. So, maybe the trend is thin crust pizza. And you're going to say, you know what, thin crust pizza is completely out and cauliflower crust pizza is trending. And, here's why. And here's our recipe to the best cauliflower pizza that's on our menu. And so you want to give out some of these secrets that maybe your audience would be like, wow, I want to read what that cauliflower pizza is that is the best-selling cauliflower pizza. So you want to do this and you want to rinse and repeat. So you want to do this about 2 times a month. So it's going to take some brainstorming, and you're going to have to come up with different angles every month that could be tying in, like I said, a holiday, or maybe even the Super Bowl is coming up, something that is trending. So it's called the editorial calendar, and that's something that should be part of your arsenal. So what else do you need? What are the talents and tools that you're going to need to do your own public relations, whether you do it yourself, or you could ask your agency about what are some of the talent and tools that they use. So number one, I like to always recommend a journalist type of writer. So former journalists or even writers that are currently working for a publication, they're always looking for extra work. So instead of trying to teach somebody that knows how to write for marketing purposes, you want to find a writer that is a journalist that is already used to writing, maybe 1 to 5 articles a day, so they can write fast, and they're also very good and seasoned writers. I am biased. I am a graduate of University of Florida, and I can say that anybody that has graduated from the University of Florida College of Journalism is going to be an excellent writer. I promise you. Another tool that I love to recommend is called Haro, Help a Reporter Out. You can subscribe to Haro for free. And what you'll get is 1 to 3 or maybe more emails a day about reporters that are currently writing stories that are possibly a fit for your industry. So that's a way to know every day what are writers looking for, what kind of sources are they looking for. Rocket Reach is another tool that you can easily find out any email of any journalist or blogger or influencer. A couple others, Prowly is also great for media relations and media research. Grammarly is a great tool that I love to recommend, and I recommend using the paid version of Grammarly because you can get so many insights, including if you hire a writer, and you can take what that writer gives you and put it through Grammarly to see if there's any plagiarism. So if you're hiring writers for different content for your website, you want to make sure that it's original. Other tools that I love, BuzzSumo, Ask the Public, and Google Trends are all great tools to definitely look into if you're trying to come up with trending topics or seeing different ways that you can spin different angles within your business or your industry. So now I'm going to give you an example of what a PR flow might look like. And so by flow, this is kind of the order of what you're going to do to get the outcome of editorial coverage. You're going to first identify an angle. We kind of talked about that already. You're going to figure out what is the angle, what are the, maybe the next 3 months, what are the 2 angles a month that you're going to focus on. And then you're going to write that pitch. So that's going to be that very concise. Most of the time it's an email. It could be over Twitter and a DM or on Instagram and a DM, depending on, you need to find out and show up where the media is actually most active. So some producers are on Twitter and reporters are on Twitter. A lot of the TV talent is definitely on Twitter. A lot of them are now becoming more popular on Instagram, depending on the industry. So you want to get that pitch down, very concise, and then email that pitch to the very select short list of journalists so that you can very easily follow up and keep that list tight and in control. When you do get news or when you see news that is maybe overlap or some of these journalists have just shared, you want to make sure that you share it on your social channels. So you might want to like a post that one of the journalists that you're trying to create a relationship has just posted. Or if they do write about you, you want to make sure that you share that news across your social channels so that you can show your audience that you have been endorsed by a third party either media or somebody that's an influencer. What I like to also recommend is that you create a paid social campaign to target the media. So let's say you want to get a little bit broader and you have a media list of, let's say, 100 different media outlets that you've researched and you found their email addresses. You can create a social campaign in Twitter or in Facebook, and this is kind of a little bit of a gray area. Make sure that you have a social advertising expert to help you so that you don't waste any money doing this. But when done effectively, I really like it because you're going to be showing up in the media's newsfeed when this is possible, and it's basically like brand awareness or brand recognition, very targeted to your audience, which would be the journalists. That would be the perfect journalism fit for you. Next, I want to talk about the media kit. So a lot of influencers have what's called a one-pager or a media kit, and that's all great. But I recommend that brands of all sizes have a media kit. So this is something that is easily accessible either online in your newsroom, that the media can just go to your website, find your newsroom, and easily find the bios of your leadership team, headshots of your leadership team, a fact sheet on your brand, maybe some videos of a spokesperson or somebody from your leadership team talking so they can get an idea of how they're going to be on camera. And then topics of expertise. Also making sure that you actually have a dedicated website / newsroom on your site. This is the number one thing that is missing that journalists complain about when they do go to a brand's website and go to their newsroom, and that is the media contact. So if the media wanted to get in touch with your brand and talk to somebody and interview them, making sure that the media contact information is easily accessible on your newsroom or somewhere on your contact page, and that person who is getting that email knows that immediate response is required. So when the media is working on a story, it's super important that you respond as soon as possible, within minutes, if not an hour or two at the most. If the journalist doesn't hear back from you right away, they have a list of different experts that they're looking at, and they're just going to move on to the next. Or what normally happens is the first or second one to actually respond to their request, those are the ones that get covered. So that's super important to make sure you have your media contact person's information updated. So that could be an email address. And I also like to recommend having a mobile contact number, where if you have a mobile number listed, and maybe it's a secondary number that's only used for business, then that tells the media, okay, I can try to text this person right now and possibly get through. So definitely make sure that you have that on your checklist. Last but not least, strong visuals make a huge difference. So making sure that when you're sending out any type of pitch or press release, that you have 2 to 3 very strong visuals. So invest in photography often. I can't stress that enough. We do more than just organic public relations here at my agency, at the Buyer Group. We also stack on top of PR. We'll stack social advertising and influencer marketing. And the best performing content when we're doing any type of PR, brand awareness, and then we put some paid on top of it, are the visuals that are action oriented, that the brand has invested in, not your standard everyday photography, but something that looks a little bit different, something that looks a little bit bold. I mean, look at what we can do on our own now with our iPhones, with our smartphones. We can invest $25 in 3 different apps, and we can basically have an outcome of a professional photographer. So if you're not standing out, if you don't have some sort of creative spin to your visuals, I would definitely take a look at that and see what you can do different. Next, I'm going to talk about results. So what happens when you do all of these different steps and you get into the public relations flow that I just talked about? So what could possibly happen? So what could happen is, number one, you can get picked up in Google search results in a variety of different ways. So if you pay for an online distribution of your press release, that's one way to get into Google News. If you do get a media pickup, whether it be TV or radio or podcast or a digital version of a business journal, most of the time, and hopefully, you'll get some sort of a link back to your website. And so what is the link, authority link, I'm going to call it, back to your website? What does that mean? It means that you can get very high referring traffic, high quality referring traffic to your website. It means that Google is going to see that you've been mentioned with a link from an authority source, like, let's just say the New York Times, or let's just say the South Florida Business Journal, or let's just say the Orlando Sentinel. So all of these types of media pickups, they all make a difference. You're going to get credibility. So one of your, customers might be reading that publication, or they might see you being interviewed on the news, and they're going to say, hey, that's my financial advisor, or that's my hair salon that I go to. So all of these things make a difference. It'll give you thought leadership. It'll get, it'll get you more media attention. So the more media attention you get, other media will see that you've been interviewed, or that you've been, maybe a local news affiliate interviewed you, and maybe it's a local ABC news affiliate. And then guess what? Good Morning America is also part of the ABC network. They watch, they see what's happening at the local level, and they might say, hey, we want to interview this person about this topic for Good Morning America. Same thing with Today's Show. So they're NBC, so an NBC affiliate might get the attention of NBC, and might end up on, maybe it's Today, maybe it's some other more national type of media coverage. So press mentions, they get you social proof, and they also get you, guess what, new business and new audience. I wrote an article earlier in 2020, and the article was a result of many, many conversations that I've had, and I think I did a whole episode on my top PR myths. So I'm just going to go over my top 6 out of my top 13, and there's probably going to be more added to this after this year. But here's some public relations myths that I just got really sick of hearing and I want to clear the air on. So the first myth is, this is one of my clients told me this last year. He's like, Lisa, this other agency that we're looking at, they have offices in New York and they have offices in LA, and they can just walk down the street or walk down the hall, and this is before COVID, and they can just say, hey, can you do this article on my client? And that is possible. Yes, it is possible, but it is a complete myth that the best PR agencies are in New York and LA. And that's not taking away from any agency that is in New York and LA, but you can have the same results that any agency anywhere could possibly get. Just because you live in New York or LA or Chicago doesn't mean you're going to get any better results. It really has to do with being very systematic and being very dedicated and not giving up and making sure that you're matching the right story and the right angle with the right publication. And if you could do that, that's magic. You are actually making a journalist's life easier if you can get it right. They hate getting spam. They hate getting pitches that are really long and really are not a match. So it's not that hard to match up the right producer, reporter, journalist with the right angle. So if somebody is covering, let's just say, food and wine, and you're pitching them on Facebook, they're going to hit delete and they're going to mark you as spam. My second myth is that digital PR is all about press releases. So I have mentioned press releases a couple times. Press releases are still part of the public relations strategy. We like to recommend doing one press release a month just to stay fresh in Google News. Digital PR today is more than just press releases. So that's a myth that it's the end all be all is the press release, but it definitely still is important. Other areas, other parts of the PR strategy include making sure that you reach out to influencers and getting influencers to give you that third-party type of endorsement and that user-generated content, and storytelling and making yourself part of a larger story. So the press release is not dead, but it's not the end-all be-all. My next myth is that public relations only impacts top of funnel. So that is also just completely not true. PR is basically impacting every part of the funnel, including the customer. So once you get a new customer or once you have a client, the selling or the relationship building doesn't stop there. So if you have a client or a customer and they see you on the news, that is just reinforcing their relationship with you. If you are reaching a new audience and somebody says, hey, that seems like, I want to sign up for that gym or I want to sign up for that class, then you're reaching, and that would be top of funnel. And middle of funnel would be maybe the third or fourth time somebody hears about you. First they saw a Facebook ad, then they saw a Google ad, then they saw you on TV, and that is what sealed the deal. They saw you as a very credible source. So it goes way beyond top of funnel, and just keep in mind that it takes multiple touch points for somebody to finally decide to sign up or become a customer or decide to actually pull their money out of their pocket and go with you. And that goes for a service business, that goes for a local business, that goes for a large Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies. It goes for every type of industry. So it's not the typical scenario where somebody's going to see a Facebook ad and say, okay, I'm in, or they're going to see you on TV and they're going to say, okay, let me Google them and let me sign up right away. Traditional PR is dead. So I got into this whole digital PR arena very, very early on. And I really was very urgent about it. I thought that every other public relations agency was going to be on the same page as I was, and that it was going to be a race to see who would be first to figure out digital. And for a while, I would say up until a couple of years ago, I really kind of got away from, I'm going to call it traditional PR, where we were doing traditional media outreach, because we didn't have to. With social and with search, it was easier and more effective to just rely on Google and social. And what I've learned is that traditional is not even close to being dead. It is still a big part of the PR strategy, and so is Google, and so is social. So you want to make sure that if you hire a PR agency or you hire a PR freelancer or a PR professional, that they understand traditional public relations and they understand what it means to pick up I almost said pick up the phone. They understand what it means to do some research, figure out somebody's email address, and form a relationship with a journalist, with a reporter, so that they can then influence their decision to include you in some sort of media piece, whether it be digital, online publication, or a TV, radio, podcast. My next myth is you can test PR for 3 months. Just try it out. Yeah, just try out public relations. That sounds great. Wrong. That is not good. That's not a good way to go about any type of public relations path. Needs to be a dedicated, always on, never taking a break. It's consistent. It's part of your permanent digital marketing strategy and implementation and plan, and there's never a pause on public relations. So if you think you might want to just try out PR for 3 months, save your money. You're not going to get the results. It'll be a complete coincidence if you do end up getting any type of story, and maybe that'll give you the taste of like what it would be like to invest in PR. But if you are a small brand, large brand, Fortune 100, Fortune 500, just starting out, if you're an entrepreneur or any type of, maybe you're a student, maybe you're thinking about starting your own business, just understand that public relations is going to be more impactful. It will take longer than advertising, but you cannot, it doesn't have the same value. So public relations is in the long run going to be more valuable because it's something you can't actually buy. Next myth, PR results will be consistent each month. So this is something that you really have to kind of wrap your brain around, is that it's not advertising. We're not going to be placing an ad in a certain publication with certain creative that's going to have a call to action, and you'll be able to say, okay, we did this last month, we should be able to do this month. So some months in PR, you won't get anything. I mean, those are your ramp up months, and those are the months that you're doing your pitching, and you should always be doing your pitching and researching and fine tuning your media list. So each month is not going to be consistent. You can get a major win 1 month and not get anything for 3 months, and then maybe get a couple small wins. And sometimes the small wins are the ones that really turn out to be the major wins. So just be patient and be consistent. The next thing I'm going to talk about is Google, and how does Google fall into the public relations strategy? So this is mainly focused on local businesses, local small businesses, or local businesses if you maybe have several different locations. Google My Business. So Google My Business offers the greatest impacts for brands seeking local exposure. And it's basically allowing businesses that use it, and I need to stress that so many small businesses don't pay attention to Google My Business, and they don't even know what it is. What it is that it gives you an opportunity to really own the whole right side of the first page of Google when somebody is Googling your brand name. So it's a great opportunity to have very visual, very detailed brand awareness on page 1 of Google. So you can include things like your business address, your business hours, your category, reviews are going to show up there. There's a great article in Search Engine Journal that is how to completely optimize your Google My Business listing. And it's by Sam Hollingsworth. So you can go ahead and Google that. And I also write for Search Engine Journal. I can attest that it is a very credible publication, and you should subscribe to it and pay attention to all of the different articles that are coming out, which include topics like SEO, PPC, content, social, news, and also artificial intelligence. What I love about Google My Business is that you can actually also have posts just like in Facebook, and the posts actually give you an opportunity to showcase an event or showcase maybe something that is special that's happening at your business. So I highly recommend leveraging the power of Google and Google My Business to get your exposure, free exposure. This isn't something that you have to pay for. It's something that if you leverage all the different optimization angles of Google My Business, you'll end up seeing the different types of exposure that you will get for it. Then I want to talk about social media and how does that fall into the public relations strategy. So want to make sure that you're really optimizing when it comes to social. And it really depends on which channel you're focused on. And I'm using the example here of how to really take a deep dive into local and optimize for local. So let's just use Instagram, for example. So, and let's just say you're a gym, and you're a gym in Orlando, Florida. So you want to make sure, people are looking up gyms in Orlando. They might look up hashtag Orlando gyms. Or if there's a local influencer that you want to tie yourself into, making sure that you're focusing and you're following those local influencers to let them know about your business. If they're foodies and they're in your area, you want to make sure that you're interacting with them. Making sure that this is something that I see not done a lot on Instagram, especially with restaurants and hair salons. Making sure you take advantage of all of the different features that the social media platform has. So just using Instagram, making sure that if you're located in Chicago, Illinois, or LaGrange Park, Illinois, or a suburb of a major city, that you're really drilling down into that location hashtag and also that location tag. So making sure that, whether it's on Facebook, you can check in, or on Instagram, you're making sure that you're able to check into maybe the city or the restaurant or the local business. Also, this is something that's a little bit under the radar, but taking advantage of local sponsorships and figuring out, okay, would it be sponsoring, let's just say, the local Little League, or maybe it is a virtual event that's happening for your chamber. So these are easy ways to get your brand in front of your audience, where maybe it's your logo, or you do have a little bit more control than you would over a press release. But once you start supporting some of those local types of sponsorships, that really opens up opportunities for it to be a win-win. So maybe in the next opportunity, instead of you paying for, and let's just say, an ad or some sort of your logo as part of one of the sponsorships, maybe the next time you're getting a story that you can write for that event. Next, I want to talk about reviews and how reviews tie into public relations. Just some statistics. We are in a review-obsessed economy and world, and reviews have never been more important than they are today. So 92% of consumers read reviews for local businesses. I don't know about you, but I live on Yelp whenever I go to a new city, and I look up restaurants around me. If I want to go to a yoga studio, I look up yoga around me, yoga in whatever the geographic area that I'm in, and I pay attention to reviews on Yelp especially, and also on Google. Some people they pay attention more to TripAdvisor if they're big travelers. It just depends on what your audience and might be looking up. But making sure that you do pay attention to Google reviews and you interact with positive and negative reviews. Another stat, 88% of consumers trust online reviews as much as personal recommendations. So that's pretty strong. And like I said, if you aren't leveraging Google My Business and you don't have a complete handle, or somebody in your brand does not have a complete handle on managing reviews and also doing review outreach, so that would be very similar process to what I talked about earlier with media outreach and media flow. So looking at how can you try to attract positive reviews, which is basically third-party endorsements, because it's inevitable that you're going to end up getting a negative review, and that's just normal. If you don't have negative reviews, then that looks like a little bit fishy to consumers and also to some of the platforms like Yelp. So making sure that you're doing outreach to get as many positive reviews as possible, and then that is going to offset any negative reviews. And any negative reviews, you will use that as a learning moment where you can share it with your team, you can adjust, and you can get better and make sure that you respond to whoever left you that review. So if you're looking for some ideas on how to ask for a review, so if you're local or remote, this isn't something you can sometimes ask for a discount or give a gift in exchange for a review. It's not something that I would recommend doing, but it is done. If you're remote, you can ask for a review in an email. You know what? If you don't ask, you're not going to get what you want. So you always have to make sure that ask is there, and meet them where they are going to be in the most convenient possible situation where they can write a review. So maybe that would be via phone, via SMS message, or maybe it's through social media. You can also ask for reviews as part of your in-person communication. So if you're a retail business and maybe it's part of your part of your staff's communication training, that when they say thank you so much and we would love to get a review from you, and make it as easy as possible for them to understand that reviews are important and here's how to go about doing it. So you could do also communicate that on a receipt or in a follow-up email. This yoga studio that I go to in Jupiter, the minute I walk out of my yoga class, I get an email about maybe 15 minutes later, not the minute I get out, and it's saying, hey, Lisa, how did you like your class today? We would be honored to hear how you liked it. Share a review on any of these different channels. And I haven't actually left a review yet, but in my mind, I think, you know what, I need to leave them a review. So it's very similar to the touch points I talked about earlier, that you're not going to get that review or that story or that coverage the first time you ask. But if you keep asking, you're going to stay top of mind. Next, I want to talk about virtual events. So we're in a definite virtual event type of arena here with the pandemic last year, and things are still mostly not in person. And how can you leverage the situation to your advantage? And we've seen a lot of businesses reinvent themselves over the past 10 to 12 months, and it's been very inspiring. So we're pretty fortunate to have some of these platforms like Facebook, where you don't really need to have any investment in equipment. You could do a Facebook Live pretty easy, depending on the computer that you have. And it could be as raw and real as you need it to be or want it to be. But if you don't, you have to start somewhere. So I've had clients over the years and still today that don't like to do Facebook Live or don't like to do some sort of a live event where it's a pop-up event because they can't control the situation. So if that's you, I would just recommend maybe starting a private Facebook group and invite small groups to get used to going live on Facebook and kind of use that as your starting point. A great example I love to use is my friend Jurgen. He owns an agency called Polymash and specializes in podcasting and SEO, and him and his wife have what they call free SEO Saturdays. So you can find that at polymash.com/live. And it's really cool because what they do is they meet, I don't know if it's every Saturday, but you'll have to look it up. But what happens is you can actually submit your podcast and they'll review it live, and they have different experts that will come on and give you different ideas on what you could do better to be found in Google search results and optimize your podcast. And it's a great way to keep yourself in front of people, and you're actually offering free advice virtually that anybody could use. And podcasts and audio experiences are definitely the trend. Restaurants have also done an amazing job at reinventing and just going live via Zoom, from their kitchen, and maybe sharing recipes just to kind of stay in front of their patrons and their audience, and making, maybe their life a little bit easier. They can't come to the restaurant, but they can share different ways that maybe you could make the same recipes at home. Next, I want to talk about AR, VR, and QR. So augmented reality, virtual reality, and QR codes. So one of the first, basically everybody is familiar with Snapchat. So Snapchat was one of the first and easiest examples of using augmented reality for a personal standpoint, but also from a business standpoint. And right now, Snapchat is, really coming on strong, and their platform, their advertising platform, is very similar to Facebook's ad manager. So it makes it easy to kind of jump right in for those of you that have been advertising on Facebook. But there's a nice opportunity if your target market is between 18 and 24. Chances are Snapchat might be something that would be worth looking into, and you can leverage the local angle with Snapchat local business advertising. So definitely look into that. And just some examples. So you can launch ads for as little as $5 a day. You can drive traffic to your website. Snapchat is making it super easy. I just took a course with Dennis Yu and just wanted to kind of get behind the wheel of the Snapchat advertising platform and see what the possibilities were. Not that I'm turning into a Snapchat, advertising agency or anything like that, but I'd like to know what's possible when it comes to public relations and how to layer different paid types of opportunities on top of it. And then next, I want to talk about augmented reality. So this is something that I really, really want to emphasize to learn as much as you can about it. So even if you're just starting on Snapchat to learn about augmented reality. So brands can use augmented reality to allow consumers to try products before they buy them. And Gucci came out with some lenses that were really cool where they came out with a new brand of new type of shoes that you could like see what they look like on you. I mean, it's very popular now with brands like Wayfair, where you can actually see what something's going to look like inside your house. So with the whole pandemic and social distancing, this is something that is really taking a huge leap forward. So I really want to emphasize learning as much as possible about how you can integrate augmented reality into your brand. And now QR codes. So QR codes, I felt like they were very yesterday, but all of a sudden they're very popular, and I really am kind of obsessed with using them in very creative ways. And here's a stat for you. 81% of Americans have smartphone devices, and among those ages 18 to 29, 96% have smartphone devices. So if you're afraid somebody's not going to be able to use a QR code, if you're using one, a lot of restaurants are using them for their menu, but there's also creative ways that you can use QR codes to make things friction-free and easy to either sign up or call to action. So if you're having an online event, using a QR code to promote that is something definitely to think about to get that exposure and get that sign up. So that would be a great example of getting somebody to sign up or getting an email address, some sort of a bottom of the funnel type of action that PR can push forward. Some creative uses, I talked about menus, but payments, you can use QR codes to invite somebody to follow you on Instagram, website pages, direct them to a specific website page for directions. You can use a QR code, like the example I used about me walking out of the yoga studio, getting somebody to write a review. So that could be the invitation. They just have to go to use that QR code. You can also direct them to specific articles or even stickers. And then lastly, I want to talk about audio. And there's been a huge surge over the past year or two with podcasting. And if I had to ask you, if you had to guess what percent, how do people most often find out or search for a podcast? And before I knew the stat, I would not have guessed this, but 30% of people who are looking for podcasts do it via searching the internet. So making sure that if you do have a podcast for your brand, or you're a podcaster listening, even if you're a podcaster that is very popular, you might not realize how important it is to be optimized and making sure that your audience or your prospective audience can find you in a Google search. So I mentioned Jürgen earlier, like he really is, I would definitely follow him, sign up for his emails, because he is the expert on optimizing your podcast. If you do decide to start a podcast, which I did during the pandemic, I announced it with a press release. So why not? It's sometimes hard for brands to really take a step back and realize what kind of news is happening within the brand. Maybe they think this isn't newsworthy. And that's why you should have an expert, whether it's an agency or a freelancer or a PR professional that's from the outside working with you, because they can see things that you can't see within the brand. They can identify newsworthy, very newsworthy stories that it's hard to do it when you're inside the brand. As a bonus, I'm going to put in my show notes how I mentioned I launched my podcast during the pandemic, and now we're here in February and we have way more than 100 episodes. I have to look, I think we're in like episode in the 130s or something. But I just want you to look at podcasting from a public relations perspective and know that you don't have to start with episode 1. There's a good chance, I didn't realize I had this, but you can look in your archives and see if you've been maybe a speaker at different events, or you've done maybe some webinars for your audience or your prospective audience that you could turn into maybe your first 5 to 10 episodes of your podcast if you're starting one. So I went ahead and I shared, I'm going to put these slides in the show notes, so you can go to socialprsecrets.com and see exactly how I launched my podcast with 50 episodes in actually less than 45 days. So around the time when I did my press release announcing Social PR Secrets, we had already published more than 50 episodes. So I highly recommend announcing a podcast, even if you have a podcast milestone. So if you reached your 100th episode, or my friends Joe and Matt, they published their 300th episode not too long ago. So those are milestones that I would recommend. Maybe it's a social press release. Maybe you announce it to your social audience. Maybe it's something you announce in an email. I didn't even have a chance to get into using email marketing from a public relations perspective, but we will in a future episode. And that's why you should subscribe. Make sure you're subscribing to Social PR Secrets. And you can go to socialprsecrets.com and find out all of the different ways you can subscribe. And if all of this seems too overwhelming to you and you want things done for you, you can look us up at thebuyergroup.com, and my team of experts can help you launch your very effective and purposeful public relations strategy and program. So with that, I'm going to say namaste and thank you so much for hanging out with me today in this solo episode, talking about local public relations and how small businesses can leverage the superpowers of search, social, and more. Thank you for listening to this episode of Social PR Secrets. If you like what you heard, check out the book on Amazon or follow our blog at socialprsecrets.com. This episode was sponsored by The Buyer Group, a social PR agency striving to keep our balance in the digital world, practicing public relations, social media, and search marketing, while occasionally drinking a glass of wine or two for the best creativity and results. Thank you all for tuning in. If you would like to get a free chapter of Social PR Secrets, go to socialprsecrets.com/free.